Hi everyone, we're going to learn to code in Python in 10 minutes using EarSketch. EarSketch is a free online digital audio workstation that lets you use code to remix beats, set effects, and compose music. Right here is a sound browser. In the sound browser, we can pick genres. In this case, we can pick hip-hop as our genre. And then we can go through all the beats associated with that genre. We can test them out using the green button to test hear the beat for the first time. Then we can just click on the favorite button, and if we logged in, it'll show only the favorites. And then if we go into the script browser, all the code that we write is automatically saved here as a script. Here's all the scripts that have been shared with us, and here are all the built-in functions in EarSketch in this API browser. Here, this book will point you to the additional curricula, including Python and C, which is our curriculum for learning how to code in Python using EarSketch and music production. So it'll have a bunch of different lessons for the basics of Python. It'll show you videos and coding exercises, and it's a great free tool. Now, let's go into variables. So variables in Python are like name tags. The rules are that they are case sensitive with no spaces. It can start with a letter or an underscore, and they can include numbers. They just can't start with a number. So in this case, we have clip, track, and start as the variable names. The values of the value of clip is hip hop dusty groove 03, track equals 1, start equals 1. Now we're going to use insert media, which is a built-in function in EarSketch that places a sound clip on the track and the start measure that you choose. So insert media clip track start. It's going to insert hip hop dusty groove 03 at track 1, starting at measure 1. Okay, and we're going to run this code, and then we're going to do this instead this time with the variables. So insert media clip track start. And because those variables point to the values hip hop dusty groove 03 and track 1 start equals 1, it does the same exact thing as the line 19. It's just using these variable names that then point to these values. So it works perfectly fine. Now we're going to use fit media, which is a built-in function in EarSketch, similar to insert media, except now you can insert the end. You can tell it when to end that value. We're now going to use this code a couple times. This time we're going to reuse these variables clip, track, start, and end. We're just going to assign them different values. And then we're going to run this fit media code, which will then drop in these two different beats. The first beat goes on track 1. That's the hip hop dusty groove 03. The next beat starts later on track 2, hip hop dusty groove 007. And because we use fit media, we can tell when to start and when to end. This next section is for loops. And for loops are simply a way to repeat a block of code in Python. So in this case, we're going to say beats equals hip hop beats. And for beat in beats, which basically means for each item in this list of beats, I want you to run the code on line 23 to 26. Everything that's indented on 23 to 26. You can see it's just going to layer in each beat one after the other on each successive track, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So notice the colon. That's important. So the block of code has a colon and it's indented 4 spaces. Okay. So with each loop, first loop, it'll put that first beat on track 1, and then we'll go out 4, and end will increase by 4, and the track will go to track 2, and it puts in the next beat. So hip hop bass sub 01. It then puts that on track 2 and then runs the code again. This time, track will equal 3, start will increase by 4, so start now equals 9. It runs the code again, drops in the next beat, hip hop bass sub 007. And then finally, the last one is the hip hop dusty groove 09. You can see when we play it, it inserts each beat one after the other with each loop, with each repetition of that block of code that starts after that for loop. And so first loop puts in the first beat, second loop it puts in the second beat, and each time it increases track by 1, increases the start by 4, and the end by 4. And that's how a for loop works. It just loops again and again until it gets to the end of the list of beats. Okay, now let's look at while loops. Very similar to for loops, it repeats a block of code. This time, the key difference here is that it's looking at a value. It's basically looking at when to stop. It's asking you when to stop. So in this case, we put in this variable called counter, starting at 1, and then we're going to increase counter by 1 each time we run this loop. So it's going to keep checking, when do I stop? And if counter eventually equals 4, which is as soon as counter is not less than or equal to 3, it'll stop running this loop. And all it's going to do in this case, it's going to insert this beat. It's going to insert this beat, 808 main beat at track 1, starting at 5. Then it's going to increase the value by 8. So first it comes in at 5, then at 13, then at 21. And then it'll keep on doing that 3 times until counter equals 4, and it'll stop running this loop. So you can see it just drops in this beat, and it does that 3 times, and then the while loop will stop because counter eventually equals 4, because we keep increasing counter by 1. That's while loops. Pretty simple and straightforward. In the next section, conditionals, we are going to basically create an input statement called read input. We're going to assign that to the variable DJ request. So that allows the user to give us input. Okay, in other words, it's a built-in function in EarSketch called read input, which asks the user, in this case, to pick the beats, and then we assign that user input to the variable DJ request. And then we check the values of DJ request to see whether they chose hip hop or dubstep. And if the user chooses neither of these options, it defaults to playing techno beats. So we choose hip hop. It says if DJ request equals hip hop, which it does, then beats equals the hip hop beats. Okay, so then you'll see that it runs that for loop, and then it places in all the beats associated with the variable hip hop beats. We choose dubstep, and it says, well, if DJ request equals dubstep, then it now beats equals the dubstep beats. So then it runs that code and says, now it looks at the beats on line 18 that are associated with the variable named dubstep beats. And then it, runs the for loop and just puts in those beats as per normal. Now, if we choose techno beats, for example, well, we didn't actually have to type this in, because you'll notice it says if else, and the else is beats equals techno beats. So in other words, assuming that DJ request, the user input, in other words, does not equal either hip hop or dubstep, then by default, it's going to play techno beats as it does here. So we could just type in gibberish. It's going to work. It's going to play the beats as expected. So it's going to put in those techno beats because else is the default. Whatever is after else, that'll just be the code that executes if none of these other conditions are true. And that's how conditionals work. Here we go into functions, and we'll wrap up with this one. So we're going to create a function called def repeat track, which takes 5 arguments: clip, track, start, and counter, and skip. And so all that really does, clip, track, start, repeats, and skip, All that does is we're going to just take our little while loop, we're going to indent that 4 spaces, and now we're going to replace some of these values in our while loop with these different arguments, these different variables that are sort of passed to the function when we call it. So we define this function, then we call this function by saying repeat track, and we're going to say, in this case, the first on line 29, we say the clip equals 808 main beat 10, track equals 1, start equals 5, repeats equals 3, skip equals 8. And then we can call that repeat function, that repeat track function again, with this 8-bit video speak and spell voice. So you can see now, instead of just having that one beat repeating 3 times, we now have on track 2 another beat repeating, another sound clip repeating 3 times. And that's what happens with functions. You can just basically take some code that you've written and then define a function to basically reuse that code with different values the next time you call it. So the first time we call it with this 808 main beat, like we heard last time. And the next time we call it on line 31 with this 8-bit video speak and spell voice. There we go.
Right. Machine.
And that's the value of functions. So you've learned variables, loops, conditions, and functions in EarSketch. We'll see you again on Python MC.
Python MC.